Hello, welcome to the Bakwas channel for self-paced tutorials on Internet of Things. This video introduces a hardware attached on top hat for the Raspberry Pi 5 single board computer. This hat is manufactured by Seed Studio in two models that will be examined in this video. Seed Studio offers hardware attached on top hat for the Raspberry Pi 5 single board computer. There are two models of these hats, one with a single M.2 slot and the other with two M.2 slots. MicroSD cards cannot withstand intensive read-write operations owing to the underlying technology. However, microSD cards offered a simple way to popularize single-board computers like Raspberry Pi. As we say in the industry, there are only two types of secure digital SD cards: cards that have failed and cards that will fail. While there are a few effective strategies to avoid complete loss of services owing to microSD card failure, it is more prudent to avoid dependence on microSD cards, especially when the frequency of read-write operations is rather high, as is the case with machine learning solutions or even solution development. Using solid-state drive (SSD) is a better option to host the operating systems and support files for single-board computers. Raspberry Pi 5 offers reasonable support for SSD through a PCIe connection. Also, migrating from microSD to SSD requires only a few steps and will provide productivity improvements when used appropriately with the Raspberry Pi 5. Some of the notable features of this M.2 hat are high-speed expansion. It supports PCIe Gen 2 X1 speeds. It can be used to expand high-speed storage with non-volatile memory express (NVMe) SSDs and Halo Neural Processing Unit (NPU) AI accelerators. It has multiple size support. It is compliant with several SSD form factors such as 2230, 2242, 2260, and 2280. It has a back-mounted design. This hat features a back-mounted design that allows users to freely use the 40-pin GPIO header on the main board. It can be used in conjunction with other hats. Additionally, it does not obstruct official Raspberry Pi heatsinks, fans, and Power over Ethernet hat (PoE), providing better airflow and cooling efficiency. It has a user-friendly design. An S-shaped flexible printed circuit FPC cable design that does not obstruct the microSD card. Also, by connecting this M.2 hat at the bottom of the Raspberry Pi 5 board, the user can attach other hats on top. There is a stable connection. There is a pin-out grid organization (POGO) pin for extra power supply to ensure a stable, high-speed connection. The term POGO may be influenced by pogo stick design, where a spring-loaded mechanism ensures connection. And of course, there is the open source case. Seed Studio M.2 hats are not compatible with the Raspberry Pi official case. So Seed Studio provides a computer-aided design file in step file format for users who wish to print their own cases using a 3D printer. The Seed Studio M.2 hat is available in two designs. The first design has only one M.2 connector. The second design has two M.2 connectors. The first connector is generally for an SSD card. The second connector is either for an SSD card or, as may become more popular, for a daughter board to support artificial intelligence hardware. The Halo board is an example of the use of the second slot for computing purposes rather than storage. Google has a similar board called Coral with different interfaces. But as with anything from Google, good luck in trying to stay current with either Coral or let alone finding a retailer for their daughter board. Some minor configuration changes are needed to enable the PCIe Gen 3 interface. The steps to perform these changes will be explored in a later section of this tutorial. The M.2 size has four options: 2230, 2242, 2260, and 2280. These sizes are all very popular and offer varying capacities up to terabytes of storage. Perhaps cost and capacity should be your guide in making an appropriate selection. The second version of this particular PCIe to M.2 hat from Seed Studio has dual M.2 slots. The second slot can be used for the Halo AI daughter board. Raspberry Pi Foundation launched the Halo AI kit for the Raspberry Pi 5. This kit has a hat and the Halo AI board. Two separate physical boards that are mounted on top of the Raspberry Pi 5. The Seed Studio M.2 hat is mounted at the bottom of the Raspberry Pi 5. The dual M.2 hat from Seed Studio will accommodate the Halo board. Unfortunately, it is not possible to buy the Halo board without a hat from general retailers. Seed sells the Halo board, but there is no reduction in price for the Halo board, even if it is bundled with the Seed Studio hat. For this reason, it may be better to buy the Halo AI kit separately. You can then use the official Raspberry Pi hat from the kit for other solutions. But remember, there is only one PCIe connector to the Raspberry Pi 5 board. The M.2 hardware attached on top hat from Seed Studio was chosen for this demonstration. Seed offers two versions of the hat, one with a single M.2 interface, the other with two M.2 interfaces. There are several advantages in using a second M.2 connector if available on a hat. Use the second SSD, which can be useful for backup or mirror operations, offering some improved recovery or high availability options. Or you can host an auxiliary board, such as the Halo board or Neural Processing Unit (NPU) for artificial intelligence applications. Unfortunately, no retailer is offering the Halo AI board without an accompanying M.2 hat. Bundling hardware in this manner is illegal in the US. But of course, the volume of potential lawsuits will not be enough for the lawyers to be happy. The SSD must have a partition before data can be written on it. gparted is the most common utility to create a partition on SSD. It is not installed under the default Raspberry Pi Debian operating system. One must use the standard apt command to install it. Thereafter, one can use the utility with the command line or with the graphical user interface to perform the operations on the SSD. We're going to go ahead and install gparted using the standard apt method, and that is sudo apt install gparted. Once we've finished installing it, we can launch it right away from the command line. And after providing the admin credentials, you can see a GUI pops up. So basically, gparted can be run as a GUI. And when you open up the default home page, will have the default boot device selected. So you go to the top right-hand corner and select the new drive that we've just added, and you can see it's unallocated. So it is not attached to anything. And so we go ahead and create a partition table and on the drive by selecting device and then say create partition table. Once we've created the partition table, we can go ahead and create the partition. So again, two basic steps. One is to create the partition table under device, and then to create the partition. Once we finish creating the partition, we can then go ahead and do SD copier. So in terms of creating the partition table, MS-DOS format is fine. It's not really important because it's a nominal size. In the case of the actual partition itself, you will notice that by default, given the size of the partition here, it's going to go for the ext4 format, which is the standard Linux format for the device. So we'll allocate the entire device as the sole partition on the SSD. And of course, we have to make it a primary partition because eventually we will want to boot from it after we finish the SD copier function. So we make sure that the starting and the ending points are first and last, and then apply it. It'll take a few seconds to do that, but it shouldn't take too long since there's nothing to be honestly, copied or transferred over. Once this is done, then we will go ahead and launch the SD copier utility. So let's wait for this to finish, and in a short few seconds, it's going to go ahead and done. And as you can see, it's partitioned the entire SSD to the available space. So let's go ahead and close this, and now we can verify the information if you choose through LSBlock, but we'll just go ahead and use the SD copier function and launch it to copy the microSD card information, which we're showing in here, which is the and then copy it over to the Samsung SSD. So a little bit of flip here, and then we just start the process. And it again, because there is some information, the OS is there and a couple of apps have been installed, we're going to go ahead and give it some extra time. So I'll pause the video for now and then resume once we reach towards the end of the copy process. So now that we've rebooted, you will notice that the capacity of the boot drive is still around 128 gigabytes, which is the capacity of the microSD card that we're using. In other words, the microSD card is still the boot drive and not the SSD where we copied the images. So we have to go to the Raspi config operation to change the boot order. So we need elevated privileges and go into advanced options to configure the boot order. So we select advanced options and then we scroll down to boot order and we choose the boot device. So let's go back one more time because of fumbling with the keys. And now we're going to choose the boot information that we want to go in there. And we are going to choose the login also, whether you want command line or desktop at the same time. Since I was using this primarily in headless mode, I chose the option to go in. And then we reboot. And after we reboot, we will now see that the boot drive is indeed the SSD drive. After rebooting, you can now see that the SSD is the boot drive. The capacity is 1.8 terabytes, and we're already using 192 gigabytes. If you recall, the original microSD card was only 128 gigabytes, and given all the exercises that I've been doing since then, I've already exceeded the capacity of the original microSD card in this SSD. So once again, I would strongly recommend that you look at using an SSD for your auxiliary storage needs. It is relatively easy to install the M.2 hat from Seed Studio on a Raspberry Pi 5 computer. This upgrade to the hardware is strongly recommended to improve your productivity with the Raspberry Pi 5 computer. This presentation examined the features and deployment of the Seed Studio hat for the PCIe interface on the Raspberry Pi 5. Seed Studio has provided excellent documentation that was leveraged in this presentation. The company has over a decade of experience in supporting Raspberry Pi family of computers. Finally, Raspberry Pi Foundation has eventually made it very easy to install additional storage on the Raspberry Pi 5. If you have a need, and who doesn't need more reliable storage than microSD cards, then go ahead and evaluate. Just remember that the industry standards required unused SSD to retain data for only 1 year. So keep using the SSD once you have activated it. That's all, folks. Thanks for taking the time to view this presentation. Would love to hear from you with your feedback. You're always welcome to be critical in any which way you can. Until next time, bye for now. This presentation was prepared with assistance from free open source software for the backbone of this video tutorial. The key products are Inkscape, OBS Studio, Kdenlive, LibreOffice, and of course, Ubuntu. Teachers, viewers, and peers provided valuable feedback. My apologies if I have inadvertently omitted anyone from this acknowledgement. A very big thank you to y'all for the assistance.